During the Second World War, the Royal Air Force developed a radar-equipped Hudson bomber to seek out German U-boats. These explorations into anti-submarine warfare aircraft led to the Lockheed PV-1 Ventura and PV-2 Harpoon, which was a major redesign of the Ventura. The United States Navy contracted Lockheed near the end of the war to design prototypes of a land-based patrol bomber. Originally called Guardian by Lockheed, their prototype XP-2V1 would become known as the Neptune, which first flew on the 17th of May, 1945. Production aircraft were delivered to the United States Navy in July 1946 and entered service in March 1947. The first Neptunes to enter service with the United States Navy demonstrated impressive performance for the time. With a maximum range of 6,649 kilometers, or 4,131 miles, with a cruising speed of 281 kilometers per hour, 175 miles per hour, and a maximum speed of 486 kilometers per hour, or 302 miles per hour. A heavily modified third production P-2V1 aircraft, nicknamed the Truculent Turtle, flew from RAAF Pearce in Western Australia to Columbus, Ohio. The 55-hour and 17-minute flight, which started on the 29th of September 1946, flew non-stop and without refueling across Australia and the Pacific, a distance of 18,081 kilometres, or 11,235 miles. The flight also carried a gift from Australia to the Washington National Zoo, a kangaroo. By 1949, the P-2V4 variant was fitted with more powerful engines, the ANA-PS-20 radar, and could drop and monitor sonobuoys. The following variant, the P-2V5, would be the most produced variant and the first to be exported. The RAAF needed a long-range maritime patrol aircraft to replace the ageing Avro Lincolns and to cover Australia's maritime surveillance area of responsibility, which was enormous. By February 1951, orders were placed for Neptunes to re-equip No. 11 Squadron, and deliveries started to arrive in November of that year. The 12 aircraft were up to P-2V5 standard and sported the standard United States Navy scheme of overall gloss sea blue. The Neptune's anti-submarine and anti-surface capabilities included the ANA-PS-20 search radar with a range of 370 kilometres, the ANA-PS-31 attack radar with a range of 45 kilometres, electronic countermeasures, searchlight, 40 sonobuoys and acoustic receivers, bomb bay mounted torpedoes, sea mines, depth charges, and underwing rails for rockets. It was quite a leap in technology from the Lincolns, and the 10-man crew required a significant amount of training in both systems and tactics, which would ultimately culminate in complex joint multinational exercises. Neptune crews found themselves operating from remote bases such as the Cocos Islands, Christmas Island, Papua New Guinea, and regular deployments to Malaya, Philippines, and Thailand. They maintained a search and rescue standby commitment, as well as routine maritime patrols and joint training exercises with the Royal Navy and the Royal Australian Navy. In May 1954, 11 Squadron moved to RAAF Base Richmond to be closer to the Royal Australian Navy units around Sydney. In 1957, 311 Squadron Neptunes conducted perimeter patrols around a British nuclear testing area at the Montebello Islands off the northwestern Australian coast. The two tests which were conducted in May and June the previous year, named Operation Mosaic, would be the largest nuclear test in Australia, the second test yielding 60 kilotons. It was also in 1957 that 3 RAAF Neptunes completed an around-the-world flight, known as Operation Westbound, covering 50,000 kilometres and showcasing the Neptune's long-range ability and navigation prowess. In November 1958 and February 1959, 4 Neptunes provided coverage and radio homing for 35 Sabres, flying from Williamtown in New South Wales to Butterworth in Malaya. Sadly, on the 4th of February 1959, at Richmond, an engine fire burned through a wing spar, causing the wing to fold, and the aircraft inverted at low level while attempting an emergency landing. Squadron leader Geoffrey Cullen and his crew were killed on the banks of the Hawkesbury River, not far from the perimeter of Richmond Air Base. This was the only Neptune to be lost in RAAF service. It was also in 1959 that Neptunes of 11 Squadron participated in the Joint Australian Anti-Submarine School research off the South Australian coast with British warships. These exercises trained Neptune crews in anti-submarine tactics and included the Weapons Research Establishment's research trials in anti-submarine radars. The original Mark I P-2 V5s were upgraded with the magnetic anomaly detector tail boom, providing the capability to localize submerged submarines for accurate targeting. The nose turret was also replaced with a clear nose and the dorsal turret removed. From June to December 1959, 11 aircraft were upgraded at the Lockheed facility at Ontario, California, to be fitted with Westinghouse J-34 turbojets under the wings. Here's Ian Badham talking to us about the Neptunes they have on display at the Haas Museum near Sydney, Australia.
The Neptune was marine reconnaissance. Like the Catalina we have here from the World War II era, the Neptune operated in the late 50s through the 60s and 70s and were replaced by the Orion that we have here as well. It had a remarkable anti-submarine capability with the MAD system, the big fiberglass bubble under the belly, and the long antenna sting in the tail to look for metal and then to drop sonar buoys to try to detect where the submarine might have been. Also had a sniffer on the nose which took samples of the air to see if there was any diesel fume left. The submarine may have dived down. And then it was a matter of putting the sonar buoys out to try to triangulate where the sub could be, and these aircraft were equipped with depth charges and torpedoes to finish the job. The power plant on the Neptune is the 3350, the same as on the Constellation, a piston engine. And the RAAF, like other air forces, found that if you fueled the aircraft to its maximum patrol capability, then loaded it with 11 crew, then all the ordnance, on a hot summer's day it was very difficult to actually take off through lack of power. So most of the air forces, in addition to the piston engines, also fitted the Westinghouse auxiliary jets. Normally, the pistons run on petrol, jets run on kerosene. Because they are an afterthought, then all here run on petrol. But they were so thirsty that they were on for takeoff. As soon as they were airborne, then the jets would be shut down for the duration of the flight and only put back on again coming into land in case a go-around was required. An interesting side note is that a Westinghouse jet of these were what a guy called Ken Warby put on his tinny, well, a bit more than that, and set the world water speed record on Blowering Dam near Tumut in the Snowy Mountains, 511 kilometres an hour. So strap that in your tinny and see how fast you can go. So the Westinghouse jets give the Neptune that extra grunt for takeoff. And it's beautiful to watch an aircraft operating where it's turning with a radial engine and it's burning with the jet engines. So turning and burning is what sets the Neptune apart.
By September 1960, No. 10 Squadron had ordered 12 P-2 V7 Neptunes to replace the aging Lincolns. Between March and May 1962, the new Neptunes arrived in Townsville for the squadron, proving major improvements for anti-submarine tasking. The ANAQA-4 passive acoustic Jezebel system could localize and classify submarines with passive sonar buoys. Also equipped with the ANAS-A20, dually active short-range explosive echo ranging system, and ANAQA-1 for active range-only sonar buoys, a state-of-the-art suite for the time. With a range of other electronic support measures and a diesel fuel sniffer system, this aircraft, now redesignated SP-2H, became the primary maritime patrol aircraft for Australia. Operations such as Gay Rover and Galley Slave saw the Neptune operate out of Learmonth, Cocos Islands and Butterworth, where Soviet submarines would often be encountered. On the 10th of February 1964, No. 11 Squadron P-2Es were involved in the response to the collision between HMAS Melbourne and HMAS Voyager off Jervis Bay in New South Wales. And in 1971, 10 squadrons searched for the crew of the abandoned ketch named One and All off the Queensland coast. A Neptune sighted the survivors and vectored the Royal Australian Navy submarine HMAS Otway onto their position where they were rescued. In 1965, the 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment was being transported to Vietnam on HMAS Sydney. Due to the threat from Soviet and Chinese submarines, Neptunes of both 10 and 11 squadrons provided continual escort, along with Navy destroyers, from Townsville to Vung Tau in South Vietnam. To achieve continual cover, the Neptunes were deployed from the Philippines, Singapore, Butterworth, and 3 flew between Lae in Papua New Guinea and Agana in Guam. No. 11 Squadron would re-equip their P-2E fleet with P-3B Orions by 1968. Meanwhile, No. 10 Squadron continued to operate the SP-2H for another decade, monitoring waters close to Australia during that Cold War period. The last operational flight was on the 30th of November, 1977. A fisheries surveillance sortie before the fleet was retired, being replaced by the P-3B Orion.
Thanks for watching, and if you appreciate what we are doing, please subscribe and support us by checking out our merchandise shop.